Well, welcome everybody. We're going to begin. It's okay for you to finish up your lunch. And gentlemen, please be seated. We're going to, having so many law enforcement officials, they're better behaved than most of the people that we have speak at our events here at ND and MPI. I'm Simon Rosenberg. I'm going to be a light moderator for this discussion today. We're really pleased that you've been able to join us. We have a wonderful panel in front of us. And for those of you who don't know about us and our program here, we've been working for several years now on a project that we call the 21st Century Border Initiative. And the idea is to reimagine our relationship with Mexico, to envision a different way to think of a border, which is in really many ways the end of something as opposed to it being what we want, hope it will appear in the future to be at the central Lexus point between our two countries, as opposed to being a frontier at the end of things, very much at the center of things. A border that is dynamic, where trade is growing, and where the good things that we want to get through, which is goods and commerce and legal flow of people, happen more frequently and faster, right, at the ports of entry, but where the things we don't want to get through happen less. And I think that this vision, which was codified in a statement by our two governments when President Calderon visited here in the spring of 2010, is a tremendous and an important foundation of a way of thinking in a much broader way about how we can reimagine our relationship with Mexico. One of the reasons that this is so important, in addition to this being one of the longest borders between two countries anywhere in the world, is that this speaks to, I think, a very important challenge for the U.S. in the 21st century, which is how we are changing as a country. And for those of you who don't know these stats, right, 10% of our domestic population in the United States today is of Mexican descent. 20% of all the people of Mexican descent alive in the world live in the United States. Mexico is now our third largest trading partner, our second largest export market. There are 22 states in the country that have Mexico as their largest export market for their own goods made in the United States. The border crossing in Oteo Mesa near San Diego is the busiest land border crossing in the world. Right? And increasingly, I think that as our population changes, as we move from being a majority white country to a majority minority country over the next 30 years, our own understanding of who we are and what we're about is going to change. We're going to be increasingly less sort of west of Europe, but also north of Latin America and east of Asia in our own understanding of who we are. And I think one of the great places where I think this change of who we are, the way our economy is evolving, the greater integration with Mexico and Latin America is inexorable given our own domestic population changes. One of the places where this is going to be most apparent is going to be how we manage our joint border with Mexico. And so what we have today, 6 remarkable leaders who are on the front lines of building economic opportunity and creating greater safety and security in their communities, who are going to share with us some of their reflections. This is part of a delegation that's here that's meeting throughout the administration today. This is the second such delegation that's visited Washington. We've now had in meetings here and around the country, NDN has been working with over 50 now mayors and sheriffs in the border region to make sure that their voices are heard in this very important national debate. Because as you all know, when you think of the border region, if you live here, right, you have an image that is perhaps not as positive as things really are. Because what is true, and what we'll hear about today, is the border region is safer, the immigration system is better, trade with Mexico is growing, and there has been tremendous progress made in the last few years. There's still an awful lot more to do, but progress has been made, something that should be acknowledged and celebrated. But we're going to be talking a lot today about what else there needs to be done. So thank you for being with us. I again want to thank our 6 guests here. And let me introduce them, and we're just going to jump right in with Congressman Sylvester Reyes. So on the far end, and I'm not going to get this in the right order, I apologize, but on the panel is we have Congressman Sylvester Reyes from El Paso, an old and dear friend of our organization, who's been a spirited and arguably one of the most important leaders on these matters in the whole country. Congressman Henry Cuellar, who's also here with us today from Laredo, Texas, someone who's also we've known for a very long time, long before he came to Congress, and it's been great to see the impact that he's had here, particularly in recent years. We also have the police chiefs we have Police Chief Adolfo Gonzalez from National City, California, Police Chief Carlos Maldonado from Laredo, Texas, Police Chief Carlos Garcia from Brownsville, Texas, and Sheriff Lupe Trevino from Hidalgo County, Texas, who are with us today. We're just going to go in this order, and please just introduce yourself, and we'll hear from everybody for about 5 minutes, and then have plenty of time for Q&A. Congressman, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon, and thank you all for being here. And I wanted to first express my appreciation to Simon Rosenberg, who, as he said, we've known each other for a very long time, and we feel very fortunate that he's head of the NDN and has always had the interest of the border because he recognizes what an important part of the economy of not just the United States, but of Mexico and Canada as well, with the passage of the North American Free Trade Agreement. I've had the opportunity to work on the border. First of all, I was born and raised in right outside of El Paso, an internationally renowned place that goes by the name of Canutillo, Texas. Raise your hand if you've heard of it. Everybody raises their hand. That's great. My mom, who's watching over us today, would be very proud. While she was alive, I always said that my mom thought it was important not to forget your roots and Canutillo. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I've had the honor and the privilege of a great opportunity in being able to live and work on the border all my life, and now I represent a border district, which is the 16th district of Texas. After serving in the Army, I took all the federal exams, and the Border Patrol was the first to call me for an interview. I was fortunate enough to pass that interview, and I spent the next 26 and a half years as a Border Patrol agent. So up here on this panel, I like to think of, I'm here with my colleague in Congress, Congressman Cuellar, and my former colleagues in law enforcement, although I've been out of that field now for about 15, 16 years, I feel a very strong bond with the sheriffs and the chiefs of police, especially those along the border, but certainly we owe a lot to the men and women that keep our communities safe. And border communities are some of the safest in the country. In fact, I represent the county of El Paso, where El Paso is the largest city, and El Paso is the safest large city in the United States. Oftentimes, you hear the political rhetoric from different politicians here at the federal level who want to talk about making the border secure, about securing the border and making it safe. So I like to remind people like Speaker Boehner that you're more likely to get burglarized, raped, or murdered in the cities that he represents in Ohio than you are in the city that I represent in El Paso, and that's a fact. Of the 10 safest cities, the 5 of them are along the U.S.-Mexico border. So for those of us that live on the border, those of us especially that were born and raised on the border, and in my case worked my adult life securing our country's border between the United States and Mexico, and now represent a border district, we are very offended when we've got politicians that don't live on the border that want to tell us how they're going to secure the border. I always look at it as an affront on the great work being done by these gentlemen up here and the men and women that work for them and work alongside federal agencies like Customs and Border Patrol, DEA, FBI. We've got a tremendous presence of very outstanding law enforcement people along the U.S.-Mexico border, which is about 2,000 miles. And their work is reflected in the fact that, as I said, 5 of the safest cities are on the U.S.-Mexico border. So we've had kind of a running gun battle, and I know Henry feels the same way because we've participated in hearings that were, I think, I'll use the word set up to try to make a case of a case for criticizing the administration. But the reality is this: we have done an outstanding job, and I'll use that word, outstanding, because I know what it means and what it represents when we're talking about border security. The Obama administration has done an outstanding job by continuing the work that was started by President Bush and his administration post 9/11 in securing the border in between the ports of entry. And we've grown the Border Patrol. I retired in December of '95 to run for Congress, and the Border Patrol back then was about 5,600 or so officers. Today, we've got over 21,000 officers in the Border Patrol. So we've done a very good job of hiring new Border Patrol agents, largely to work in between the ports of entry. We've gotten them the best technology, best equipment to be able to work in between those ports of entry. But now we need to, I think, we need to focus on the ports of entry, because not only is that where the major challenge today is in terms of narcotics coming into this country and weapons and money going south into Mexico, but those ports of entry were designed to inspect people coming into the United States. Today, because of the different threats, we need to remodel and redesign those ports of entry, both on the southern border and the northern border, so that they can do inspections running both ways. We can inspect people coming into this country at peak times in the morning, and then reverse those lanes and allow people to cross back south in the late afternoon or evening after working in our border communities. In addition to that, we need to also be mindful that weapons and money from drug proceeds go south through those ports of entry. Today, as we're sitting here, we've got a vacancy ratio in terms of optimum staffing level for those ports of entry of about 5,000 CBP officers, inspectors in the legacy INS. So we need to address that. And we've also got a deficit of agricultural inspectors. About 1,200 of those are needed, and about 350 support positions. So we've got legislation that I've introduced, and Henry's on. Lead Republican sponsor is Mike McCall, who we both know from his service on the House Homeland Security Committee. But we need to get that legislation through. If we pass what we call the Ports Act, then that stands for putting our resources towards security. Remember, we're talking about border security. We've done a great job in between the ports of entry, but again, we need to do a better job improving the infrastructure and staffing the ports of entry, not just for security, but also for trade and commerce that are vital and important parts of this overall system. So the Ports Act, we're hopeful will work its way through committee, and that we'll be able to invest $1 billion a year for the next 5 years once it passes to do the infrastructure piece. And by the way, it's not just infrastructure on the U.S. side, because that would not make sense. We're working in concert and in partnership with the government of Mexico so that everything would be designed at the optimum level to work its way between the United States and Mexico, using, by the way, also the latest technology. So that's exciting because for the first time, we would have a fully functioning, complete border system, investing $5 billion. When you, and you know, $5 billion is a lot of money until you compare it with the amount of money that we've spent in Iraq. GAO told us that they can account, the government can account, the U.S. government can account for $100 billion that were spent in that war. So I think $5 billion is more worthy in terms of the payback that we get in trade and commerce. So again, thank you, Simon, and I wanted to thank you all for being here, and I'll now pass it on to my good friend and colleague, Henry Cuellar from Laredo.
Thank you again very much. I'm going to be without a mic if it's okay with y'all. First of all, I want to thank Simon. Simon, I've known Simon for a while. All right, I'll put it right here. Yeah, hold this for the.
He loves that guy.
I want to thank. First of all, I was going to thank Simon, but I will go ahead and thank my constituent, the sheriff, the good sheriff from Hidalgo County, which we've known each other. He's done a lot for Hidalgo County. I also do have another constituent of mine, Carlos, the police chief Maldonado from Laredo, that has a lot of good experience, and we are very proud of these two individuals. And a little outside of Brownsville, but I thank also the chief of Brownsville. And, of course, the other folks. Simon, again, thank you very much. Y'all been doing a great job. Sylvester Reyes, as you know, he's been a former patrol, chief of patrol. He was the head of the Intelligence Committee, a very powerful committee, and I'm very proud of Sylvester for all the work. He's now in Armed Services right now, so we provide, a lot of work that he's doing there. I'm from Laredo, Texas, the largest inland port. If you take Laredo, compare it to all the ports in the state of Texas, combine them all together, it doesn't match what's coming in from Laredo. We used to get about 14,000, Chief, about 14,000 trucks a day, north and south, so that I can imagine the amount of traffic that we have in Laredo. I think it's slowed down to maybe 11 or 12,000 trucks a day, those 18-wheelers on that. But Laredo, when we talk about trade is very important to us. Certainly, one of the things that I look at, I'm the former chairman of the subcommittee on Border and Maritime of the Homeland Security. I'm the ranking member. We're waiting for us to assume chairmans again when we take the majority. Sorry, no political advertisement, but when we do take the majority, we'll work on this, because it was under the majority that we passed the largest infusion of cash at one time for border security. Sylvester, myself, and the other border guys were the ones to push for this, because we understand the border, it is safe, but we want to make sure that it remains safe, and we put the largest amount of cash in the border. It's interesting because one of the things that we're seeing now, as the chief said, as Sylvester said, is that there's a lot of talk of folks, and I think you might have seen me in Fox News, and I've always said that I don't mind. Somebody said, "Are you going to apologize?" I said, "Sure. I'll apologize to those two generals when they apologize to the border. Then I will apologize to them, because, again, you cannot attack the border and not know it, not understand the border. For example, let me give you a couple figures that Sylvester talked about, and I've used this a lot in Homeland Security, and this is what I brought up also to folks that go up there and attack the border. If you look at the FBI statistics up here, you'll see the border. The border is the low ones. You see the Brownsville, the El Paso, the Laredos and all that, they're the low ones. You go up to the other ones, and these are murder rates. And Detroit, I think it was your mayor somebody asked him, how does it feel to live in the most dangerous city? I said, I don't know, ask the mayor of Detroit. And as you can see, the other areas up here. And again, you can look at murder rates, you can look at assault, you can look at other things. And this men up here, working up here, this law enforcement folks that are working up here, and the other ones out here in the audience also, I got to say my brother over here, the sheriff of Webb County also, but the men and women that do the work on the border will tell you that these stats are very, very, very important. It was interesting that, anytime there's something that comes out, people, the ones that are trying to paint the border as an area that's very dangerous, they disregard areas. For example, the findings, so they disregarded the FBI figures. And then the other thing is, the Border Patrol just came out. I asked them to do a threat assessment of the border. And there is a classified or official use, so I have a copy if anybody's interested of one that can be put out. And basically what they said is that narcotics, as you know, what they do is they look at the threats on the border. they have the low, the moderate, significant, and high. Where the border area, at least where the Border Patrol is, the Coast Guard is at, they classified that as a moderate threat itself there. And if you look at migrant smuggling, folks feel that everybody came in through the southern part of the border. But as you know, 40% of them came in through visas, legal visas. If you look at the 9/11, they didn't come in through the southern border. They came through visa, and about 40% just overstayed their time. And if you look at it, I've always said this, I'm against the fence. It's a 14th century solution to a 21st century problem. To put 1 mile of technology on the border, it's about $1 million. And this is questions that we ask Homeland there. The latest figures that we saw was to put 1 mile of fence in, it will cost $7.5 million. Yeah, to construction. You add maintenance and all that, it's going to be a lot more. With $7.5 million per mile, 700 miles times 7.5, that would tell you that we could have saved the taxpayers' dollars, or we could have hired a lot of more of the COPS program, the Stone Garden program, money that we could have given to these men and women that have done a great job down here in the border. So again, it'll be interesting to see how the folks that disregard the FBI figures, let's see what they do with the Coast Guard also figures, and see what they come up with that, and see how they disregard, because in their mind, everybody's wrong, and they know that there's a threat down here. I think the folks that made that report that we were up there on, the generals or retired generals said that living in the border is like living in a war zone, and 24 hours everybody's being shot at. We know that there are isolated situations. We know, Sheriff, as we talk, there are some times when they do come across, but it's not the way people have painted it, and this is why we got to be very, very careful. We're working together to make sure that we get this. If you look at even crossings, border crossings, we now have the lowest border crossing since 1972. I think the highest was about 1.6 million individuals in 1986 when illegal border crossings, all that. And I think now we're at the lowest at about 463,000. So that tells you what Border Patrol, what our efforts have done there to make sure that we do it. And I've always said this, and Sylvester and I are on the same page. You want to control the border, pass a comprehensive immigration reform, because you know who's coming in for a temporary job and who's going out, and then you can focus on the bad guys that are coming in not for a job on that. So again, if we can pass a comprehensive immigration reform, we can do this. In conclusion, the border is very important. I know we emphasize a lot on the border security, but the border is important for trade. For example, every day there's about $1 billion of trade between the U.S. and Mexico. Every day, $1 billion of trade. If you look at the 4 states on the U.S. side, Arizona, New Mexico, California, and Texas, keep in mind Texas has 1,200 out of the 2,000-mile border itself. But if you look at the 4 states, at the 6 Mexican states, put all those 10 states together and put them as, let's say, classify them as a country, it would be one of the largest countries in the world, number one, and the economic input that we would have from those 10 would be one of the most powerful engines as a country in the whole world if you would look at the border. So instead of looking at the border as a place that it's only border security, look at it for retail, tourism, trade, and what it provides for the rest of the country itself. So again, I appreciate everything that the folks have done on that. I will be here for another, probably another 20 minutes or so. I have a meeting with somebody that you might know, John Morton, who's the head of ICE, the director of ICE. One of my fellow ICE folks up here who does work for me wants to go meet him. No, I'm just kidding. So we're going to be heading off in a few minutes to go talk about issues dealing with ICE, as you know. But again, thank you, and I'll hold this for you. You got some notes. You got it.
Thank you, Congressman. Actually, he didn't want to hold the mic because us Hispanics speak with our hands. So the mic will be going on like this. So, but I'll try and temper myself and hold the mic here where it can help me some. First of all, I'd like to thank those responsible for giving state and local law enforcement a voice on the national level to really tell the truth of what is happening on board and what is not happening. When I first read the McCaffrey report, I was really shocked. It was 800 some pages, and I confess I did not read the whole thing, but I read the abstracts, and I was really shocked. One of the things that concerned me a lot was that us on the border, we were never contacted to give our opinion and to give them first-hand testimony as to what is really happening. A lot of it was based on hearsay.
Can I interrupt?
Yes,
Sorry.
absolutely.
I did ask both generals questions, and one of the questions I asked them was, how many witnesses, like you said? I said, how many witnesses did you talk to? They couldn't even remember. Then I asked them, did you talk to anybody on the border? Did you talk to, the sheriffs on the border, the police on the borders? And they said, oh, yeah, we did talk to somebody in Austin, Texas. I said, okay. I said, well, that's something. But the sheriff is right. Nobody was talked to on the border.
Thank you. That is true. That's what concerned me the most about the particular program. But I can tell you this, and I've been in law enforcement business nearly 40 years. 25 of those years have been on the border as a head of several drug task forces, one being a federal task force, and I've been the sheriff there. I'm ending my second term. And I can tell you that Hidalgo County, which is the county that I represent, has never been safer than it is today. In the last 5 years, violent crime has literally dropped 54 points. Last year alone, we take 1 year in comparison to the year prior, we dropped 43%. And a lot of that, in my opinion, is due to the infusion of all the DHS folks who we have a great working relationship with. And I think that's one of the reasons that we have been able to stem the horrendous things that are occurring in Mexico right at the border. Now, we cannot deny that some horrible things are occurring over there, unprecedented. They've never occurred before. But the key is it's happening over there. Nonetheless, we cannot stick our heads in the sand and just ignore it and say, well, it's happening over there and it's never going to come over. Because by experience, I can tell you that is not true. Just 3 weeks ago, one of my deputies was shot, and 3 times by a cartel member, and I can actually say that was the first spillover violence case that I can say yes, it is. Because my stance has always been, we have not met DHS's definition of spillover violence, even though it's a matter of semantics, because everybody's got a definition for it. But nonetheless, we had not met the one that we are following, except for this particular incident. And I got that phone call that every chief of police and every sheriff in the United States dreads to get. You know, when your kids are out partying and you get that phone call, first thing that comes to your mind, God, what did my kid do? Well, all of mine are already grown and married and off. What I worry about now is my deputies who are out there every night. And the phone rings, first thing I think, so one of my deputies hurt. And I got that phone call at 8 o'clock on Sunday evening. And I had one of my deputies that was shot 3 times by a cartel member. The action that occurred in my county was subsequent to a violent confrontation that occurred in Mexico. And that's what defines it as a spillover violence. But nonetheless, one in thousands of occurrences is not a bad deal. And I think the success that we have met in keeping violence across the border is the good working relationship that we have with all the federal agencies, the real-time information and intelligence that we get from our joint operation intelligence centers, and our cooperative initiatives that we go out on a daily basis. Now, not only is crime down, but most definitely. Oh, okay. One of the things that I'm really excited about is the Americans Job Act, where $5 billion have been designated for first responder and police employment. Now, we're killing two birds with one stone here. Not only are we creating jobs, but we're giving the first responders and the police more boots on the ground, which actually that's what we need. And as I tried to explain to Secretary Napolitano this morning, and she was very receptive, is that once you have that surge of police presence, then you've got to be able to maintain it. Once you maintain that surge, that's when you're able to say, well, look, we have found success because we've been able to lower the crime rate and kept it this way. We're not showing the police presence and then pulling out. We cannot do that. And that's what I'm really, really excited about, and that's what we're going to attempt to educate and I guess lobby. Maybe I should use that word, but try and get this thing passed. But I think it is a very good thing. I think that's pretty much what I wanted to say. Yeah, I'd like to say something too. So again, thank you so much for giving us this platform where we're able to speak on a national level on something that is really true. The border is not in chaos, and it's no such thing as battle on the border, and we're not at ground zero. As a matter of fact, anybody would like to go down there, I'll take you to the best Mexican food restaurant in Hidalgo County. You have a good time.
You going to hold it for me?
Thank you. I will.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Simon, for inviting us. My name is Adolfo Gonzalez. I'm the Chief of Police for the city of National City. I've been there for almost 8 years now. I worked for the city of San Diego prior to coming over to being a chief for 26 years. I was born in Tijuana, Mexico, and from my house on La Libertad, I was able to see the international border because there was no border, just chicken wire. And we used to play at that fence. So when I was a little boy growing up, I didn't think the United States was the United States. I thought it was my backyard because that's literally what it was. Well, a few years later, when I became a U.S. citizen and subsequently a San Diego police officer, I was patrolling the 14 miles of the international border looking for border bandits. And I remember from where I was in San Isidro looking over to my house in Tijuana. It's that close. So when we're in Tijuana, we look at the United States as coming to the other side. Vamos para otro lado. We're not going to a foreign country. We're going to the other side, like to the other neighborhood. Likewise, when you're in San Diego, you're going to Tijuana, you don't say, oh, I'm going to go to Mexico. No, I'm going to the other side, al otro lado. And we say that because it's a region. What happens in Mexico impacts the United States. What happens in the United States impacts Mexico. And as a law enforcement, I can tell you, working both in San Diego Police Department, the largest police department in San Diego County, and now National City, one of the most disenfranchised communities in the county, even though our income is about, average income for our population is about $35,000, we still have a very rich culture, very rich community because we have the only indoor mall in the county of San Diego in the South Bay. So a lot of our business comes, believe it or not, from Mexico. Mexican residents, citizens that want to come to the United States to buy goods and products come to the mall. The mall invested over $34 million to expand it. 7 new theaters, a lot of different department stores. Target even moved in because we have a lot of people coming in from Mexico to buy here. What I noticed, and I took a tour of the border just before coming to this meeting, the always, and it was surprising this morning, I was staying with my daughter Melody here in D.C., and I'm watching the news, and they talked about the traffic, talked about the weather, and I'm waiting for the border report. In San Diego, they talk about traffic, they talk about the weather, and then they talk about Otay Mesa, 90-minute wait, San Isidro border crossing, 2 hours wait. I mean, that's what you always hear. It's part of the program. It's part of the system. Why? Because the delays are so long. People just rather wait. In some cases, people don't want to cross the border anymore. Well, we still maintain a very safe neighborhood, very safe community, but there's got to be a more efficient way of getting our travelers across and our commerce across, the trade. We have to find a way of getting them across. And I know that we have I have Century Pass, but we have to find a way of getting that through the security at a much quicker pace. And I know they're understaffed, both the CBP and Border Patrol, but I can tell you they have added a lot more agents between ports. We need to focus on the port. In San Isidro, if you haven't been there recently, they're going through a major renovation. And it's in 3 phases. Right now, they're just starting the one phase. But it goes to show the cooperation between Mexico and the United States. During the construction, one of those large beams, heavy metal beam, fell down. Luckily, nobody got injured. They had to literally shut down the Mexican border at San Isidro and Tijuana. So the Mexican officials assisted us, the U.S., by bringing the traffic around to Otay Mesa to enable to continue to bring commerce across, travelers across. And it took a while to get the I-beam off the freeway there and reopen the border. Within 72 hours, actually, it was back in operation. So literally, the border never really shut down. It was just diverted. Had it not been for the cooperation that we had with Mexico, everybody would have been gridlocked there. It wouldn't have been like an hour and a half wait, 2-hour wait. It would have waited there for hours. But that's because of cooperation. When I work with San Diego PD and also as a chief of police in National City, we have to form relationship with our counterparts in Mexico. A lot of the people that commit crime, for example, in San Diego County or Los Angeles area, will flee into Mexico, hoping to get away. We have such a great cooperation now that we have assistance in bringing people back that have committed offenses here in the United States that have tried to hide in Mexico. But one of the things that we do training. We do training with our officers and the Mexican officials, but you have to do it with respect, and you have to do it with working relationships. You have to have the relationship first before you can even impart the training. Just like we don't want them telling us how to do border checks. Right now, and you're right, sir, when you talk about vehicles going to Mexico, that's where the money and the drugs are going back. Unless we do a special operation of the border and check every car going south, we don't do that right now. We do it occasionally, and we do catch some people sometimes. Coming north, they say every car gets inspected. Going south, they don't. But yet, that's where the money's going, that's where the guns are going, and that's what's feeding the problem. So if we had the border check both directions, I think we can, in a safe and secure way to facilitate travel, we can be able to really enhance what we're doing. I can tell you, in National City, we have the highest crime rate in the county of San Diego. We have 9 square miles. My population might be about 60,000 at the daytime, about 120. We had like 9 or 10 homicides a year. For our city of 59, 60,000 people, that's a lot. And most of our homicides were gang-related. But in 2008, we went for 18 months with no homicides. In 2008, if you look at what's happening in Mexico, there's a lot of violence happening in Mexico. It started in around 2006. Well, in 2008, for our city to have no homicides, the last time we went a period with no homicides was in 1963. I was in grade school when that happened. That's how far back it goes. And why? Why is it that in Mexico you're seeing the violence, in the United States we're not? And like I said, you can't bury your head in your sand and say, well, it's never going to happen here. We need to work as a partnership with the representative from Mexico, because we're doing a great job with our partnerships at the federal level. We work with every federal agency you can imagine. And that's great, but we need resources. Because of the economy the way it is and the lack of people coming back, crossing the border, I had to cut my staff by almost 22% because of budget cuts. In our city, our revenue doesn't come from housing. It comes from sales tax. If no one's coming into a mall to make any purchases, that means no revenue is coming to the city, the general fund. A lot of the money that comes into the redevelopment goes to the redevelopment, which is cannot go to the general fund. Police, fire, first responders, they're all paid through the general fund. So without the sales tax, we have to get cuts. And it's difficult to make cuts because, as we mentioned earlier, we can have a surge of police presence and maintain order, but once it comes down and you withdraw the officers, guess what? It's going to come back up. In California, the state's releasing, I think, about 10 or 20,000 prisoners, so-called lightweight prisoners. In our county, we're looking at getting up to 4,000 prisoners. Those are people that have really no training, no skill other than what they were doing in the prison. So when they come out, they're going to go back to their old ways with less officers in the street. And I'm not the only one. San Diego PD has over 264 officers short. The city next to us, Chula Vista Police Department, has over 100 and something officers short. So we're all hurting countywide. So you take that into consideration, and we need the federal resources. And I think the American Job Act is going to be really a plus or a boost to all of our border towns because it's really going to enhance what we're doing and continue to provide the level of security that the community needs and the community wants, especially since we're right at the border. And I'm not talking about right at the border, like right at the river or the canyon. I'm talking the border spills into several miles away from the border. My city is 9 miles away from the border, and we see our visitors coming to our city. They go up and down the county of San Diego. So I can tell you San Diego is one of the safest cities in the county, in the country right now, for a large city. And a great deal has to do with the relationship we have with our community, with our partners, and also working with the federal government to assist us in the relationship building with the Mexican officials. We have to work with the Mexican officials. It's kind of like you have a problem with your neighbor. You just don't ignore your neighbor. You got to work with your neighbor to get that problem fixed. And that's what we need to do. and I thank you for your time. Thank you.
First of all, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being here this afternoon. I'd like to thank all the personnel from NDN and MPI for having us here hosting this media event today. To our Congressmen Reyes and Cuellar, thank you all, gentlemen, for taking time out from your busy schedules to be here with us today. Just want to know how come my congressman ain't here today, but I think I know what the answer to that one is. But anyways, my name is Carlos Garcia. I'm the Chief of Police for the City of Brownsville, Texas. And before I make any statements as to how safe the City of Brownsville is, I think I need to give you a little bit of my background because I think that qualifies and gives credibility to what I'm about to say. I was born and raised in the City of Brownsville. I grew up I got educated to the public schools. I graduated from our local college. I served the Marine Corps for 4 years, and then I came back and I joined the police department in 1981. I've been a member of the Brownsville Police Department for over 30 years. I've been the chief of police for the last 10 years. So what I'm about to say is based on experience, based on living on a border town or a border city, in which I am very proud to call my home. Brownsville is on pace right now to have a 12% reduction in crime compared to last year. I don't think Brownsville has ever been safer than it has been in the last several years. And a lot of work has gone into that, not just by us, but also by the federal agencies. It is important to note that the City of Brownsville is approximately about 176,000 in population. We have doubled our population in the last 10 years. And that doesn't include people that actually avoid from being counted as part of the census. So sometimes we feel like we're close to 250,000 in population. We have 3 points of entry within 3 miles of each other that brings in a lot of people from Mexico to visit, to shop, to work. And of course, at one point, a lot of us went into Mexico to visit, to shop, and to eat. Of course, a lot of that has gone away because of the situation in Mexico. The violence that is being reported across the country along the border is in Mexico. Not in Brownsville, not in Laredo, not in Hidalgo County. It's in Mexico. Have we had isolated incidents? Yes, we have. But we've had those years ago. And from experience, we were experiencing 20 homicides a year back in the late 1980s, early 1990s. For the last 10 to 15 years, we were on average about 5 to 6 homicides a year. Back then, at least 50% of those homicides we could directly relate to cartel issues on the Mexican side. Now, the only isolated incident that we've had in the last 2 years was a double homicide that we can actually say that was cartel related. Other than that, Brownsville is a safe city. We continue to form our partnerships not only with the community, but with our federal law enforcement agencies, because it's very important to understand that they have their responsibility to secure our borders, and they are our first line of defense to securing our country, our borders. But as local law enforcement, we are the first line of defense to our community. When a person calls 911, they don't get a federal agency to respond. They're getting their local police officers to respond to their need at the time. And that's why it's important to note that, and to our congressmen, I say this, that let's not lose focus of the partnerships that we have formed throughout the years with our federal agencies, and that we need to sustain that. But also, as they continue to invest in securing our borders, they need to also understand, and I think they have, and that's where all of this is going to, is that an investment in local law enforcement is very, very important, because whatever the federal agencies are not able to apprehend or detect, that winds up in the laps of the local law enforcement. A murder, a burglary, a robbery that we can attribute to cartel-related issues is going to be investigated by local law enforcement, whether it's the city police or the sheriff's office. And that's where an investment needs to continue to be made. When we met with Secretary Napolitano this morning, and she mentioned about the American Jobs Act and the $5 billion that's, hopefully will be invested in that, I would hope that the majority of that money goes to local law enforcement, especially along the border, because that's where it's needed. And I think in order for us to be able to maintain and continue to say that we're a safe city or a safe border, is that a lot of that money needs to go back in there. And that investment needs to be in local law enforcement, because that, at the end of the day, the person calling 911 is calling local law enforcement, and it's not calling anybody else.
Thank you, Chief. Good afternoon. My name is Carlos Maldonado. I'm the chief of Laredo Police Department. I am not from there originally. I spent 24 and a half years with New Mexico State Police. I retired as Deputy Secretary and Chief of New Mexico State Police. I have about 30 years of law enforcement experience. I've been in Laredo for 3.5 years. And I think one of the things, and it's difficult to be the last speaker because I'm probably going to repeat everything that you just heard. No, I won't. But I think what resonates here is the passion from each and every one of the individuals here on the platform. And I think it resonates very loud and clear. One of the things that I want to emphasize, being in Laredo over the last 3.5 years, I've gained to appreciate the culture of Mexico and just how close and intimately tied we are as a community, as a country, with Mexico. We have families in Laredo that still have family in Nuevo Laredo and in Mexico. So the only thing separating them is the actual river. So you have a blending of cultures, you have a blending of economy, but the sad thing, when my family and I moved to Laredo, we thought we were going to have a wonderful opportunity to enjoy the culture and to cross into Mexico and enjoy some of the cuisine and the geography and some of the things it has to offer. You can't do that. But not only can you go into Mexico and enjoy that, but there's this misperception also that instability is also being displayed or lived in the United States as well. We had a Little League tournament in Laredo, and we opened it up. There was a invitation to cities as close as San Antonio. If you can imagine this, they declined to travel into Laredo for the tournament because they feared the crime was rampant and there was shooting and everything else going on in the streets. And this is, again, a misperception in our own state. So you can imagine how successful some of the media outlets have been in terms of just really destroying tourism and the opportunity for people to enjoy the culture, the cuisine, and so much the border has to offer. So those tourism, that funding stream is not available anymore. So as a result of that, we're losing money to invest in infrastructure, to invest in law enforcement. So we're having to do things with less. We're having to do more with less. I will tell you, we just had a meeting day before yesterday, or was it yesterday, with Homeland Security. And we talked about developing a better system for acquiring and attracting information, conducting the analysis, and distributing that information across the border on the U.S. Side. So there are things we're doing in terms of technology, in terms of re-evaluating how we conduct our business to be more effective in what we're doing. I think the crime statistics, they illustrate that along the border. The thing that will kill us, and I want to repeat this and emphasize this, the thing that will kill us and destroy us is complacency. The reason we are here today, and I want to thank Congressman Cuellar and Congressman Reyes, they have been champions for border issues. If we don't continue to invest in the sustained efforts that our men and women are making in the law enforcement community, we're going to be in trouble. We can't ignore the potential threat across the border. What we can do a better job in is anticipating, predicting whether or not that threat comes across the border, and we respond and mitigate it as quickly as possible. We need to do what we can to protect this country and protect the quality of life in our communities. And I think it resonates very well and loudly with the people here. We're committed to do so. But our trip here has a purpose, and that is to educate, raise the level of awareness to our, hopefully, advocates here in Washington so that that news spreads. And thank you again for being with us this afternoon.
So what we're going to do, everybody, hold on. The sound system, I apologize if we're still running it, but we're going to take your questions. And so what I'd like to do, just because we only have about 20 minutes, is let me take 3 or 4 together, and then we'll let folks on the stage answer them to make sure all of you get to a little bit more time to participate. And so just raise your hand if you can identify yourself and say where you're from, and I'll take 3 or 4 in a row. Who wants to go? Come on, let me just... Yeah, stand up. And, is this...
Yeah,
this on?
can you hear me now?
Hold on, yeah, let me... There it is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Congressman, I was wondering, I know you weren't part of the hearing yesterday, but I was wondering, I know I was just chatting with Congressman Cuellar on the way out, but with respect to DoD technology and other applications of other technology that we can utilize from other agencies, particularly with the drawdown in Afghanistan and Iraq, do you have any particular economic analysis with respect to how we could do cost-saving measures with what we're doing on the border for security reasons and economic purposes?
Yes, we do, and we're already working on some of the potential systems that we've been utilizing both in Iraq and thinking down the road when they come out of Afghanistan as well. There are state-of-the-art sensors that are very expensive, very the latest generation that we anticipate we'll be able to use. That's the technology part of what we anticipate would give us the opportunity to better monitor. In addition to providing it to CBP, we also anticipate an opportunity to plus up the different law enforcement sheriffs and police departments along the border region. So those opportunities, I think, are going to be there. We've already started trying to anticipate and identify where some of those assets can be used. What we want to do as well is have a comprehensive and systemic way to monitor the border using unmanned aerial vehicles. That's the which one? Well, we actually, the blimps have been used on the border since I was chief down in McAllen. We've actually got some up in the Caribbean as well, and they've been very, very effective. So they've been part of the law enforcement presence on the southern border for at least a couple of decades.
Okay, so let me take two or three, if we can just cram them in. Who's next? Yes, sir. Please identify yourself.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. My name is Tomas Robles from Phoenix, Arizona. My question is that I understand that the border is secure. I've read the statistics that crime has gone down. My question is more about Border Patrol's treatment of migrants that they catch trying to cross. There's been numerous reports and proof done by nonprofits such as ACLU and No More Deaths that have shown Border Patrol pushing migrants into cactuses as they walk them out, taking off all their clothes and turning up the AC in the detention cells so they can freeze and things like that, not giving them proper medical attention if they're hurt. And I was wondering if you, Congressman, or you, police chiefs and sheriff, if you've heard of any instances of the mistreatment of migrants, and if there's anything that can be done about it, because I do know the border is being secured, but I see the treatment as migrants as something that should be brought to light as well.
Well, as a former chief of the Border Patrol, those are instances that you want to fully investigate and make sure that they're not happening. I've had a number of conversations with now Deputy Commissioner David Aguilar and Chief Fisher, who's the National Chief of the Border Patrol, about those reports, about those kinds of allegations. In order for the Border Patrol or Department of Justice to investigate, there have to be specific details. A lot of times it's anecdotal. A lot of times these are reports that are second or third hand. So I would urge you or anybody else that gets these kinds of reports to get specifics, date, times, names, so that those allegations can be fully investigated. As a chief, I can tell you, I had no use, and chiefs have no use for anybody that carries a gun and a badge who is abusive. That's not why we're there. That's not what we do, and it brings discredit, I think, on all law enforcement, in particular federal law enforcement. When I was the chief of the Border Patrol, I don't know if anybody wants to.
Can I just add? And I just want to echo what Congressman Reyes said. As a chief of police, and these gentlemen I know will agree 110%, we will not tolerate any case of abuse, period, end of story. Not only will those people face potential administrative sanctions, but potentially criminal charges as well. I work very closely with chiefs of Border Patrol. They are professionals. They have the same professional beliefs that we do. The only thing I can tell you is that if there are any cases, and again, I'll reiterate what Congressman Reyes says, you report it, because I know they will investigate very thoroughly and get something done post-haste.
I was going to say, in San Diego, we work very closely with Border Patrol. There's a group called American Friends that takes complaints from undocumented persons and reports it to DOJ, and they do investigate them fully and thoroughly. When I came to the National City Police Department in 2004, we had no system or mechanism in place to take citizen complaints. We started not only putting the forms in English, but we put in Spanish and Tagalog, because that's serving our community. And now we investigate any single complaint that comes to the police department. But let me just give you a very quick story. But bless you. About 5 years ago, I was crossing the international border. I went to Mexico because my father-in-law had passed away. And I was coming across back with my family. And the agent was asking, you know, your citizenship, purpose of your visit, and that kind of declaration. Well, my wife was pretty upset. And the agent didn't like the fact that my wife said, my father just died, I just want to get home. Well, she sent us to secondary. And when sent to secondary, it kept us there for about 30 minutes with no one even talking to us. Just sit in the car and wait. To me, that was like a punishment, more like an attitude. So when the supervisor, I said, you know, I want to see a supervisor. When the supervisor came out, he recognized me because he'd seen me in the media, in the news. Oh, hi, Chief. What are you doing here? Well, one of your agents sent me here. Sign the paper here. Get out of here. Mm-hmm. Let me go. Guess what? About a week or so later, I get a call. I want you to be our speaker for the Hispanic Heritage Month. And I go there in uniform, of course, and I'm speaking about my history and everything else. And in the back is the young lady who had pulled me into secondary. Her face just turned red. Well, when I was doing the tour before I came here, I was doing a tour. I saw 13 cars with families and children parked in the cars in secondary. So I asked the port director, the brand new port director, who's only been there like 8 months, I go, why are they all waiting here? I go, I know what it feels like. He says, well, because we're short-staffed. I got 3 officers here. I go, yeah, I see 3 taking care of one person who was being a knucklehead. I go, why don't you put him in a holding cell, let him calm down, and the other 3 agents can go and process these other people that have been waiting. I go, how long have they been waiting? He said, oh, about an hour, maybe an hour and a half. I go, that's normal? He goes, yeah, that's normal. To me, it's customer service, like we're talking about. It's about customer service. We can still do our job. We can still be effective, but we can do it with dignity, with respect, and with courtesy, and be the best customer service that you can provide. And that's what we do in our department, and I think that's what we expect from Border Patrol, from ICE, for CBP, whomever, because we want the best service that we can get. But I can tell you, I didn't tell the agent who I was when I crossed through the border. No. He wasn't. Yeah.
Let me answer, attempt to answer your question. And certainly I do not speak for the Border Patrol. But just before coming here last couple of days, I had a meeting with the campesinos in Hidalgo County with the Lupe organization, which is La Unión del Pueblo Entero. And like at least 250 people there. And I guarantee you at least 200 of those were here illegally. And I have a very close working relationship with them, and we have not ever heard of anything like that. And certainly I echo all the what was being said here about how we feel about that type of treatment. But I think if that type of treatment was pervasive, I think we would have heard something like that. And we have not in Hidalgo County anyway. But certainly, like I say, it should be reported and investigated thoroughly.
So I'm going to, we only really have about 10 more minutes, and I want to throw out a tough question to the group, if I could, and which is, you know, there's been a lot of attention in the national media recently about guns being smuggled into Mexico. And my question is that since there is documented evidence that tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of guns have walked through the cartels into Mexico and that have contributed to hundreds, if not tens of thousands of deaths in Mexico, what more can we do to stop and slow the gun flow from the United States into Mexico.
Well, first of all, you're talking about Fast and Furious, and I'm happy to talk about it because one of the big pluses of being former federal law enforcement is a lot of the guys will call me and talk to me about things that normally they wouldn't talk to any other politician. But I will tell you, ATF has gotten a bum rap on this. To begin with, because of the influence of the NRA, we have not been able to get a director for the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Department. That's been an acting position now for 6, 7, maybe 8 years. Secondly, as it pertains to the investigation that was conducted under the acronym of Fast and Furious, it was a joint investigation. It was an OCDEF controlled by an assistant U.S. attorney that has the authority to make those kinds of decisions. My agents participated in many OCDEF investigations in multiple areas: Corpus Christi, Houston, Brownsville, part of the Laredo OCDEF as well, because you have joint jurisdictions in there as well. In this particular case, it was an OCDEF investigation, I'm told, and had cooperation from Mexican law enforcement as well. As we all know, Mexican law enforcement does not have the equivalent training that our agents and our agencies have. So that's where the breakdown was. When you do a control load, whether it's guns or people or anything else, you try to keep that control load controlled. And so the handoff between the United States portion and to the Mexican side is where some of these loads went awry. And I've asked this question, not because of corruption, not because of any kind of malfeasance on the part of the Mexican agencies, but just they did not have the sophistication to maintain it. And there were a number of complications, and that's why I'm hoping that the investigation by DOJ finishes up. But to answer, so that's what I've been told. But to answer the question, we need better authorities to ATF in concert with OCDEF investigations that their agents and their police officers participate in, because everybody's included in there, because you want to communicate, and the target are the bad guys. So we need to get better authorities. It's ridiculous that we don't have a mechanism in place where these gun shops have to report multiple sales to the same person of weapons like AK-47s and other kinds of long arms. It's there for the pistols, but not for long arms. We tried to do that through an amendment recently, but again, through the influence and power of NRA, we were not able to get it passed. The administration finally did it as an executive order, and they got a bunch of grief, and now some of the committees on the House side are trying to, through the hearing process, trying to undermine that authority. So we can't have it both ways. We can't talk about criticizing federal agencies like ATF for trying to do their job with established investigative techniques and principles, and then try to tie their hands by not giving them the authority that they need, especially at a time when we're seeing these guns going into Mexico, not by Fast and Furious, but by these other straw purchasers that go through those same ports of entry that we're trying to bring into 21st century levels, and then the money. I mean, I applaud these law enforcement leaders here and have the utmost respect for them for doing the kinds of operations that really puts their officers in jeopardy as they try to check traffic going south into Mexico. Because if you've been through our ports of entry, the lines coming north are well regulated, well established. The ones going south, it's Katy, the door because the officers are having to wave people down and inspect 5 or 10 cars and then flush the traffic south and hope that the Mexicans are doing their part over there. So we just have to do a better job in supporting them. And let me just make one observation about the $5 billion. Even though some of our counterparts won't support that, as soon as that goes through, let me tell you, those of us that know that the need is on the southern border, then you're going to have the Tennessee police departments and everybody else join in because they want their part of the pie. It's not a balanced process. It is every bit a political. It's a political pie that much like the American Reinvestment Act, those of us that took the heat for voting for it, all of a sudden in Texas, every representative, including my colleagues across the aisle that never voted for it, were wanting their fair share for Abilene and Wichita Falls and all the other places. But that's the process. We just have to keep harping on it and keep talking about it and keep bringing the professionals that have the credibility as these gentlemen do. And that's why I appreciate, again, you doing this, Simon, because this is really helpful for us that are fighting that fight for resources for border communities today.
Yeah, please. We've got a few more minutes, so please
If I may touch
Yeah.
on just the second part of your question. Now, Fast and Furious, all I know about is what you read in the papers. So I'll stay away from that. But I do want to make a comment on what can we do about preventing the weapons from going south. As Secretary Napolitano appointed me as Vice Chair of the Southwest Border Task Force and Chair of the Border Violence Subgroup. And through the efforts of that group, we identified that the biggest problem that we had in trying to prevent southbound checks and the inspection of vehicles going from U.S. to Mexico was that we do not have the infrastructure at our ports of entry to facilitate that sort of inspection. Just like the Congressman said, our officers and our CBP guys, our customs folks, our ICE folks, will be working on the middle of the street. They will not be protected from the elements, and they just do not have the lanes to be able to push in for secondaries. So the first thing that we identified through that task force was if we are going to be real serious, if we're going to get serious about southbound inspections, then we're going to have to do something about the infrastructure of all the ports of entry and just completely rethink how we are building our bridges.
Final thoughts, gang, on this end? Is there anything else you want to jump in?
First of all, again, the final thought is thanks. The border, unless you haven't been to the border, I would invite you to come over. And just like the previous invitation, I'll even take you to Tijuana, get some food over there and bring you back safely. But you can't really criticize the border if you haven't been there and seen it. I speak from personal experience. I know what it's like to be put in secondary. I haven't been stopped by Border Patrol, so I can't tell you how Border Patrol acts, but I can tell you how ICE acts or Customs when they bring you into secondary. Having a personal experience give you that much richness to understand and comprehend what's really taking place and make a difference on it. So I want to thank you all for being here, and we can't lobby, but if you can educate and inform the recovery of the American Job Act, I think it's something that could benefit all of us, all Americans. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you, Simon, for hosting us and for putting this thing together. To the Congressman, sir, thank you again for taking time out from your busy schedules. And hopefully we can do more of this to educate other congressmen, especially the ones that don't live on the border.
I just want to leave you with one thought. We talked a little bit. We didn't really touch on it, but it was just alluded to very briefly. Comprehensive immigration reform. The only thing I would ask is we need to be very careful in the manner in which we approach this. Simon alluded to the demographic shift and the change that this country is probably going to face in the next years to come, generations to come. Given our limited resources along the border and law enforcement in general across this country, we need to partner and work well with our community, the community that we served. Laredo is 97% Hispanic. we need to be careful in the manner in which we approach this certain population because they are our eyes and ears, and the border is vulnerable given the porousness. There's a potential for the threat to come into the United States. This is a kind of partnership that we need to establish with this community so that they feel comfortable reporting suspicious activity. And we need to make sure that we encourage them to do so and create that sort of symbiotic relationship and build that trust. And we don't need to deteriorate that with a bad policy. So we need to approach this with caution. It needs to be informative, and we need to be very cautious in the way we approach it. That's all I have to say.
So my hope is that, Congressman, that when there are your colleagues who try to repeal sensible initiatives, like if you're trying to purchase more than 2 long guns in a 5-day period, all you have to do is report your name, not even stop the sale. That would be seen not as a virtuous act, but as an enabling the cartels. And that's something we should work on together, to turn the tables in that conversation, because it's incredible that something as thoughtful and as commonsensical is being challenged in such a direct way right now, to give all of you more tools, frankly, to take on what is a very tough subject. I really just want to thank you all for being here today, for making the trip from far away, for the wonderful day that we're having together. We've got a lot more meetings. And I do want to say that I know there's some who may want to stick around and talk. I got to yank these guys out of here in about 5 minutes to go to some more meetings in the administration. And I'm also just want to thank the White House and the Obama administration for really opening up, from Janet Napolitano to John Carson. We're going to see Cecilia Munoz in a little bit, and Alan Burson. They have really welcomed us, and they've made it clear to us through all the meetings we've been in today that this is a major priority for this administration. They're proud of the progress that's been made, but we've got a lot more to do. Thanks, everybody, very much.